Welcome to another episode of Limitless MD. I'm your host, Vikram Raya, and today I have one of my good friends, Whitney Sewell. Whitney is a real estate investor, a podcast host. In fact, his podcast is one of the most popular in the real estate industry, and he is crazy enough to do a daily podcast, and he has been crushing it. So I'm excited to speak about that. He's a philanthropist, CEO and founder of LifeBridge Capital. He has 1,000 doors, $300+ million of assets, which I'm sure has increased over the last couple of months. And he's a good friend of mine. He's a family man. He's an entrepreneur, and he has an amazing backstory, which I'll get into. But again, Whitney, welcome to the show, my friend.
Happy to be here. Great to catch up with you and your audience.
What if you could reclaim hours of free time each week, create legacy building wealth, and devote more energy to your passion projects without giving up on your career as a life-saving MD? My name is Vikram Raya, functional cardiologist, high-performance coach, and real estate expert. And I'm here to give you the tools, strategies, and solutions you need to transform your life so you can unlock your limitless potential and achieve greatness, all the while freeing up your precious time. Welcome to Limitless MD. Let's dive in. So Whitney, everyone says, you have to be this big like CEO executive, or you have to have this amazing career. You went to business school to start a multifamily company or a syndication company or something like that. Tell us about your origin story and how you can essentially disprove the fact that you have to be born into all this.
I'm a prime example of why that's not true. Ultimately, I came from no network, no accredited investors in my family. I probably had the best job of almost anybody in my family, or maybe that they had ever had. And so when it was time to leave that, man, you can imagine like, wait a minute, what are you doing, right? Why would you leave this secure position? But I had no network. So, and in a few years, get to where we're at now. But ultimately joined the military in March of 2001. Never imagined, 6 months later, our nation would be attacked. And then found myself spending a year in Iraq. Unfortunately, not everyone in my squad made it home. And so learned a lot, right? You're taught a lot as a young man if you're in combat, no doubt about it. But I'm thankful that I made it home safely. And I then became a police officer. I didn't have that diploma either that most people feel like you must have, right, to be successful in this space. And I almost felt helpless. Like, what can I do? Law enforcement was a great segue for me. And out of 1,200 applicants and only 5 positions, I was blessed to have one of those, the Kentucky State Police. Loved working the road as a police officer, being first responder, the service, the discipline, the uniform. I loved that. However, making $30,000 or less a year, in the worst schedule you can imagine, it was hard to see doing that forever. And my wife and I just passed each other in the hallway the first whole year of marriage. And so I said, okay, you know what? We got to figure out something else. This is just not what is best. And this is like 2009. This big crash thing just happened, but I didn't have a clue. I mean, I was making such little money. It was like I didn't even notice hardly. I didn't know about all this stuff then. But what happened was bought 2 triplexes after I figured out all these people built wealth in real estate. I thought, well, I should be able to do something. Made a lot of mistakes, long story short, and self-managed. Then I became a federal agent that moved us to Virginia, where we live now, and kind of the height of most policing careers, right? To go federal. And so it was great, better benefits, schedule, all those things. However, I quickly maxed that position out in 3 years. And I did stay there a number of more years, but then believe it or not, this seemed way out in left field, but I became a professional horse trainer. And that was like a passion of mine since I was a little boy. And so I started riding again, training at a pretty high level. And so I was selling horses for more money than I ever imagined. I was doing clinics all over the country. And long story short, it was 2 full-time jobs. Federal agent during the day. I'd be training horses till midnight, giving lessons, most nights. My wife and I were on the beach one fall, and we were like, what is this? What I call thinking time. It was just time away, like time down to, to really think about, is what we're doing right now going to get us where we need to go? It was obvious to both of us. It was a no. So came home.
I want to ask you a question right there.
Please.
Whitney, you had thinking time. You had quiet time. You and the person you care about most in your life sat down and decided what you want with your life. You mean you're being intentional, you're being scripted. You're like, hey, how do we design our life? Not how do we get by, but how do we design the life of our dreams? So tell me about that.
I'm not even sure that we were thinking that sophisticatedly about that just yet. We haven't read all those self-help books yet, or those books that motivate you to think that way yet, But more so than anything, it was just like, man, is this working or not? I mean, it was very basic, for us at that time, to how to think about that. But like, are we going to keep doing this? I was missing all that time with our boys, and my wife, I mean, I was gone all the time. So it's like, okay, we got to do something different. And this was September. And between Christmas and New Year's, we had sold the farm. We sold everything related to that horse training business, all the horses, all my tack, everything, because I knew that I needed to just cut that off completely and commit to real estate. I knew real estate could build wealth. And so that's really when it all started. Go ahead.
Let me ask you a question, Whitney. I have a lot of people here. They're surgeons, they're doctors, they're critical care practitioners. Maybe they're entrepreneurs. They have like an IT company or they work for government contracting. They're doing quite well. They're comfortable, but they're not happy or they're not truly free. Yeah. And you took a bold decision. I mean, you're doing either a federal agent, and on top of that, this horse business. It was good. It was probably even comfortable. How did you know that, hey, let's draw the line. Let's take a bold move. Let's burn the bridge, burn the boats, if you will, and go and do what's potentially quote unquote risky, but it could explode my life in a good way.
Yeah. I would say bet on yourself, right? Bet on yourself. Find that, I hired a mentor pretty quickly, but then I started like putting myself in places to learn as much as I could, as fast as I could about this business. But by burning the bridges like that, I had to be committed. Like we moved into a small house in town, Vikram, where not in the best area of town. I built an office in the basement, and that's where I practically lived the next 3 years. I started the daily real estate syndication show before we ever syndicated a deal, right? So there's plenty of people that called me crazy for doing that, but you got to be able to be willing to move forward. But what I would say to somebody that's like comfortable, yeah, you got to get started. You have to make that decision. Is it worth it? Are you willing to really commit? Right? I mean, are you going to cut this off, and just move into this? Or if you're that comfortable, maybe you should be passive, right? There's a fine line there. But if you're wanting to be active, you don't have to give up the day job all at once. I didn't. I did both for a few years, right? It's not the easiest model. It wasn't for me, especially doing a daily podcast, but it is very possible. Right. It is very possible to learn this business and start building a brand while still working full time and make a transition into full time real estate. But I would also highlight there the commitment level that you need is going to be big. I mean, it's big, but it's big enough that it's not just your commitment level. It needs to be your spouse. It needs to be your kids, as well. Like I did not realize the commitment level it was going to require of my wife and kids. I didn't realize that. Until we were way into it, and months into it, there were many mornings I'm sitting with my wife trying to get caught up because we wouldn't see each other other than like 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. in the mornings. And, it'd be like, okay, I don't know if we can afford to do the podcast next month, like have those hard conversations, early on.
Yeah. Oh man. Just a ton of things to unpack there, but I'm getting goosebumps hearing about your journey and like, how there's several times where you could have turned back and you just kept persevering forward. And I love the fact that you leaned on your wife, you leaned on your children, and you leaned on your why. Why is it so important for you to earn multiple millions? Why? I mean, what's the impact you're trying to have, my friend?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question because it's very important to me. And I know you know that, but so my wife and I moved to Roanoke. We came from a small town and we had, we'd been married about a year and a half, I think. And we went to this place in Roanoke. Right after we moved here, we heard this guy talking about adoption, how they had adopted and just the need to care for orphans and widows, those things. We had never been exposed to adoption before. I don't think we ever even knew anybody that had been adopted. But on our way home, my wife and I just asked ourselves, well, 150 million orphans in the world, like, why would we not adopt? We couldn't think of a good reason. Like, it seemed that simple. And honestly, I'm thankful for our ignorance in the process because it's quite a drooling process, but it's so worth it. So within a week, we applied to adopt from Ethiopia. 2 years later, our first son, Samuel, comes home from Ethiopia. A year later, our second son, Elijah, comes home through adoption. And now we have a daughter, Eden Joy, as well. There's almost 3 who came to our family through adoption. So our family's been, blessed, and it just changed dramatically through the adoption process. However, what we realize is, hey, the process can cost 40 to 60 grand to bring a child home, unfortunately. And 150 million orphans in the world, it's a crying shame that it's that costly. And so families would often tell us, they want to ask questions, right? Well, how can they adopt? And we say that amount. And they're like, Whitney, that's more than I make in a year. How can we even start that process? So we started a foundation that helps these families financially. So we provide large grants. We committed half of our personal profits from our LifeBridge Capital, from my personal profits from LifeBridge Capital, to our foundation to help these families. And so it's been so cool, though, Vikram, to see how, not only have we obviously supported that, but now our investors love knowing that they play a role in that, even though it doesn't affect their returns at all, of course. But many of them are also donating, to that cause, outside of LifeBridge Capital, directly to the foundation. But also, that big why is also what kept my wife going, my kids going. But my investors, many of them love partnering with us because of that, but also our team. Like, our team's growing a lot right now. And majority of our team members come to us, and during the interview, they'll say something like, man, I love the way you all give back. That just really spoke to me. I want to be a part of that.
So I get so excited. This is why I do the podcast. This is why I want to meet more people like you, Whitney. I mean, this inspires me. So I'm inspired by, one, you took it upon yourself to, like, hey, look, let's actually create a family out of this opportunity here to help these orphans and people who've they don't have a family, and you have 3 beautiful children because of that. On top of that, you built some of the foundational principles for your company on, hey, a percentage of our profit will go toward this cause. And then now you become like a force for good, right? And you're inspiring your investors to now want to contribute as well. And I think when you have something powerful like this, you want to grow, you want to become bigger, you want to expand, right? And the goal is, right, you're just trying to add value. And another concept that I've embraced is this thing called, there's active income, which me and Whitney have been able to move beyond. Then there's this passive income, right? And then there's passion income, which sounds like it's one and the same, right? The podcast is, I'm sure, earning income, but he's passionate about it, he enjoys it. And then he's taking all of this and making it purpose income, which is he's taking the extra profits from all these things and funneling it into his charities and his foundations and moving that forward. And so that is really a complete life, my friends. And you want to go beyond yourself. And Whitney's a perfect example of that. So give our listeners an example of how they could get started with, like, maybe creating something. Like, if they're passionate about one thing, what's the steps where, even if they're not a millionaire yet, how can they get started with helping that purpose or passion on the side?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I get similar questions to that often. And so for us, it's something that we developed a passion for, obviously because of our experiences, right? We got into that network of adoption and different agencies and, consultants and other families, connected to other families that were struggling to make their adoption happen, right? And the adoption process, man, it's so rigorous, and it is an emotional roller coaster, to say the least. And so you meet these people, right? But so all that to say, it's something we became very passionate about. We were passionate about helping these orphans, right? And ultimately helping these families bring them home. And so find that thing that you're already passionate about, because if you're not passionate about it, like, how much of a why is it going to be for you? Is it really going to get you up in the morning, to keep going? When times are tough, are you going to keep going? So what is that thing that not only you can get behind, but your spouse can get behind, maybe your kids can get behind, and potentially, other business components, whether it's employees, or investors or vendors, whoever can also share in that just compassion and drive for your mission, right? So initially, if you're not, though, let's say you're not launching that business, but you want to get started now, like you mentioned, find out somebody else that's doing it, right? Partner with somebody that already has that foundation created. I just recorded a short podcast about this the other day because I get this question often too. It's like, do I want to start my own foundation? And Whitney, how did you do that? Why did you do that? Well, for us, we wanted to funnel, obviously, a lot of funds of our own through that. And we wanted to build something that would help lots of families. However, it's like a whole nother business. And so if you're not ready to do that, it may not be the best route for you, right? We just hired our first full-time employee for the foundation, which is a big milestone for us. But we want to provide great care for them. And I can't continue to do that, right, for these families. So but partner with somebody that you've vetted or another group that's also passionate about that cause. And that's a great way to get started. And even once, if you do start your own foundation someday, you can say, hey, I've been supporting this cause for this long, or, I've always been passionate about this thing.
That's awesome, guys. So, in the beginning, you don't have to do it all yourself. As Whitney talks about, partner. Find good people, work with people, collaborate, have teamwork. I want to address two quick things, before as we start, wrapping up here. Number one is this man is a master of time management. So tell us how you're managing 3 children, a daily podcast, private equity syndication company, your foundation, and your marriage. And can I throw in health maybe?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's not easy. I'll say that for sure. It is not easy. And I would say it was much worse, obviously, when I was still working full time and trying to start the business and podcasts and family. And we were doing our third adoption during a lot of that same time, or at least getting it started. And so it was difficult. It was very difficult, to say the least. A lot of that's changed now. I've got better at time management, but a couple of things that's changed specifically is our team has grown. My expertise has grown, right? But also delegation. I've been delegating. I mean, I just delegate everything possible, right? And I have to, but it's finding class A talent, just top talent that I can bring on my team. Like finding the assistant that I have right now has been a game changer. Like being willing to pay this person really more than I was making when I was working full time. It is so worth it. She is top notch, right? But it took me a few assistants to get there, right? To find that person. But then we create systems. My email it could just take my time, half of my day every day, if I wanted to let it, right? But we built a system around that. She knows which ones I need to see. And then we have a system that helps me to see only the ones that I personally need to see or respond to, right? And then she knows what to do with everything else. So it's just a mindset of delegating. Who else can do this better than I can? And we've hired people on the team to help us with that. But then it's also saying no. I've had to do that a lot more recently. And I've not been good at that because people want to ask for my time and I always want to say yes, oh yes, I'll help you. I want to talk to you, but I just can't, and it's getting harder and harder and harder. And even like you're talking about your listeners, man, that they want that time, that quality time with family or whatever they're wanting to do. Well, I do too. Right. And so I'm blocking more days off, but also where I can be with the family, but also I need that time to think, just like we were talking about before, because what happens if I don't block that off? I will be in meetings nonstop. I mean, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays for me are almost just nonstop Zoom calls all day long. I mean, it's madness, right? But what I find is there's no time for me to work on the business, when I'm doing that, to really think about what we're doing right now, the processes, the direction we're going, the people we're bringing on, are they being treated well? Are we taking care of our people, training them? I mean, all these things, don't happen unless I have time to think about it. And then I have to be, so it starts with my getting in bed on time, right? I was stressing this to my assistant this morning, actually. It's man, I got to get in bed on time because I love my morning routine. I love being up early. And there's some strategic things that I do in the morning that's that energizes me for the rest of the day. And I know that. And so it helps me to be very productive the rest of my day. But every day has specific things that I'm doing.
That's awesome, man. I just took a bunch of notes down. I want to just tell you the highlights here. He sets in a reverse alarm so he knows when to go to sleep. And so he's there for his morning routine. Team, he mentioned that several times, is delegation, hiring class A talent and paying what they're worth. And don't being cheap about it, guys.
Right.
Systems, learning to say no. And here's my rule for life. The first 25 years of life, you say yes to everything. After age 25, you have to learn to say no to everything and say yes just to your mighty few. And he talks about day blocking, which is more unique. I've heard of time blocking, but no, he's talking about taking a whole day for certain activities, whether it's your family, whether it's white space to create the next 7-figure company, whatever that is. So amazing, my friend. That's awesome. Quickly, since you are the podcast expert, a lot of people are saying, oh, I missed the boat. Podcast already too big. There's too many podcasts out there. Daily podcasts, no way. Give literally a soundbite on why now is the best time for them to start a podcast.
Remember, you are trying to reach your audience. You're not trying to reach everybody else's audiences, right? You're going to pull some people away, no doubt about it, but you only need, let's say 1,000 true followers, 2,000 true followers to build an amazing business, right? And income. All right. So think about that. 1,000, 2,000 people. You're not trying to be the top on iTunes. You're not trying to, take Joe Rogan's, listeners from him, right? That's not what you're trying to do, but you're building a brand. You're building credibility for yourself. And also it becomes your own university, right? Mine did. After 1,300 interviews, guess what? I get to ask all the experts whatever I'm wanting to ask about. If we have a problem with a deal and I have Vikram on, guess what? I'm probably going to somehow, while I have Vikram on the show, I'm probably going to ask him if he's ever done a deal like that. And we're going to dive into it. So I'm going to pull that from those experts, as I have them on the show. So it's a way for you to learn, but even bigger than that, it's a way for you to network. And so more than just a big following, man, you are making connections with people that otherwise you would never get to meet. And it is a myth that you've missed the bandwagon, that's already passed. I mean, podcasts, yes, have been around for a number of years now, and they have taken off. But I see it just only growing. And the more niche down you can be, the better, right? The more niche down and focused on this thing that you are passionate about, man, you're going to find those people that are also passionate about that as well.
That's awesome, my friend. What's the impact you want to leave on the world? And what's sort of the most inspiring book you've read in the last 6 months?
Ooh, that's some good questions. I feel like I have to answer those quickly too. Biggest impact on the world, man. I think at the moment that would be obviously on my children. I want them to know the Lord and to serve the Lord first and foremost. But I want to grow our foundation. I would love for 1,000 families to be served, through our foundation, and hopefully more than that, as far as bigger impact wise. And obviously thousands of families through tenants and whatnot, but specifically through our foundation. And great book. You know what? I've read a number of good books recently, and since we were talking about thinking time, I don't know if you've read it or not, but
yeah, I have
The Road Less Stupid.
I need to read it still.
Keith Cunningham, great book.
So that the book he just pulled up, guys, is Keith Cunningham's The Road Less Stupid. So
yeah, great book.
And how can people get to know about LifeBridge Capital, which is your real estate company, your foundation, and maybe your podcast, the real estate syndication show? What's the best way?
lifebridgecapital.com. You can email me, Whitney, at lifebridgecapital.com. You can call or text me, 540-585-4338. You can find the podcast on there, the real estate syndication show, obviously anywhere you can listen to podcasts as well. And the foundation is the LifeBridge Foundation. You can find that on the bottom of our About page. Also, more information about that, or just email me, either one.
That's amazing, my friend. Thank you so much. And listeners, continue to subscribe, continue to forward this to friends and other people who are interested, and again, continue to stay phenomenal, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Limitless MD. If you found value from this episode, I encourage you to share this episode with a friend and let me know by leaving a review. For more information, make sure you check out the links in the show notes below, or simply visit vikramraya.com. So until next time, my friends, be phenomenal.